Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where our mission is to join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world. Or as we say in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. Welcome to one and all. I want to begin by welcoming all that you bring with you to this space, as usual, all of your uniqueness, your unique beliefs, your background, your lifestyle, your experiences, all that helps make you who you are is welcome and appreciated here this morning. And this is so for those who hear me say this each Sunday, as well as those of you who are joining us more recently, maybe even for the first time today. You're equally as welcome and appreciated. So thanks to everyone for being here. I want to thank the folks that are in the room with us. Todd Milne back there in the AV booth, running AV, and also getting our service started with his incredible music. So Todd, thank you as always for being here. And Sonny Cook is here, both to run our slideshow, which the gremlins have said, no, it's not happening today. But Sonny's here. She still serves a purpose. So I'm going to let her say a few words in just a few moments. Lisa Conger is our lay leader today. Always great to have you with us. Thanks for returning for our special Star Trek service. And Michelina Tyree on the piano. Thank you so much for being here. And the wonderful Deb Jackman to lead us in music and share some special music with us as well, I understand. So looking forward to that. Thank you all so much for being here. I do apologize again that our slides are not working. We'll try to figure out what's wrong with that this time and get it working next week. But we shall move forward. Before we do, I do want to point out that our unity candle is inflamed here at the front of our sanctuary. This is something we light at the beginning of our services when we've lost a member of our community, and it is with deep sadness that I let you know that Wayne Sabak, Heather Koselke's husband, who was, of course, our operations manager for many years, and Wayne, although not an official member of the congregation, was a big part of so much that went on around our building, including our services, including helping us get our audiovisual booth up to par, given his expertise. And he often was here even running sound for us. And beyond that, Wayne was a dear friend of mine. He was a great guy. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer back in December, and after a very short struggle with it, passed away on Thursday of this week. And so I just, it's heartbreaking, and our hearts go out to Heather and to their son Noah and to all of Wayne's family and friends who are grieving him at this time. So we'll keep his candle lit throughout our service as a symbol of the fire and light of his life. Another reminder that we're beginning our book study this Wednesday, 6 p.m. of Irshad Manji's book, Don't Label Me, beginning of a 7-week consecutive Wednesday night occurrence that will culminate with Irshad Manji herself leading us in a webinar. So I hope you'll be able to attend that. And before we greet one another today, I'm going to actually invite Sonny Cook to come forward to give us some special words, because this is Generosity Month, and she's one of our great cheerleaders and spearheads behind it this year. Sonny, thank you.
I had intended to leave the April as Generosity Month slide up when I came to speak. It's a beautiful picture of trees. And as you tuned in this morning and listened to the wonderful flute music, you saw trees waving outside our window. We are deeply rooted in Spokane, native lands, and standing strong, an historic UU church in Spokane since 1887. And with our pledge dollars together, we create community, find meaning, and work for justice. And April is Generosity Month. This past week, most of you received and hopefully read a letter, which was also included in the Weekly Sun newsletter. And if you missed it, look again in the Sun when it comes out this week, or call the office. This year's pledge form is available in that letter. With a simple click online, our current pledges are ongoing until or unless we decide to change them. But given the rather historic year we've just lived through, we're asking everyone to click online for the pledge form this year. Fill in the few lines to assure the information is correct, name, address, and so forth, and that you're still connect. And this year, we're also asking that you consider increasing your pledge by $10 a month, $120 a year, or more, certainly, if you're able. If you need to be reminded of your current pledge, like I do, your quarterly statement should be in the mail this week, in the email. And as soon as that one comes, I will click and submit with $120 new dollars for myself and for another for my husband, Bob. So I'm here to urge you to click and submit ASAP, or certainly before the end of the month, if you can. And I cannot thank any of you enough on behalf of the whole congregation for your generous support of our wonderful church here in Spokane. And I was planning to close on this Star Trek Sunday by saying, "May the Force be with you," until I was informed. Wrong movie, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonny. Yes, us Star Trek fans have nothing against the Star Wars people. You know, they're wonderful people. We just know that Star Trek is better. That's all. So. And you didn't watch either of them. Oh, gosh, you poor person. I'm sorry. Your children did. Okay, you raised them right. Well, thank you so much for your work on the generosity campaign. Not only this year, but you've been doing it for years for us. In fact, you came back this year to help out again. So really appreciate that, and appreciate all of you out there who continue to support our congregation. And I love it when the generosity team says, you know, this year we just want to ask you to give a smaller amount, what doesn't seem like an overwhelming amount for most people, whether it's $20 a month or, in this year's case, $10 a month. And it's not like, oh, an act of desperation. If we could just get $10 more a month, you know, it's really recognizing that this is a community, and $10 a month doesn't seem like a lot, but there are so many of us that by all of us just giving a little bit more, it amounts to a tremendous amount, to really tens of thousands of dollars at the end of the year. And that's enough to make the difference that we need to make together. And that's how we should do it. We should be supporting this community together as much as possible, and not put the burden on any small number of us. So I really appreciate the spirit of the generosity team and how it recognizes the value of every gift from everyone in our congregation. So thank you all so much for your tremendous continued support of our very special, historic congregation that is indeed still deeply rooted, standing strong, and ready to continue to bloom. With that said, let's take a couple of minutes here at the start of our service to greet one another. You know the drill. You've got cell phones and texting and emails, so however you've been doing that, do take a minute or so to let somebody you're thinking of know that you're thinking of them. Thank you so much. Let's move forward now by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our faith, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need. And may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
We are all familiar with these words uttered by James T. Kirk at the beginning of Star Trek. To boldly go. So welcome aboard our Starship Earth as we travel through.
Let's hold on just a second till we can get the battery back. Okay. It's on, but
Check.
We are all familiar with these words uttered by James T. Kirk at the beginning of each episode of Star Trek. To boldly go where no man has gone before. So welcome aboard our Starship Earth as we travel through space and time, sharing our stories. Poet Muriel Rukeyser says, "The universe is made of stories, not of atoms." I believe in both, actually. Telling stories is how we make sense of the universe and of our lives. The narrative is the fundamental instrument of thought. And our compassion and empathy develop from sharing these stories and deepening our connections. Writer E.M. Forster distinguishes between plot and story thusly. The king died and the queen died is plot. The king died and the queen died of grief is story. We must find meaning, and we do it through our stories.
thank you so much, Lisa. And we are now going to kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds. I did not get any specific request this week, but I would like to light another candle for Heather Kaselke Sabak and for her son Noah at this time. And let's take a moment of silence on behalf of others that you might be thinking of. And if you're with someone and wish to share those at this time, it would be more than appropriate. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence and all those who are suffering in our world, we hold in our hearts compassion. We do have a special collection this month, which you've already heard about, I think, for the past couple of weeks, but it is for the Spokane NAACP, a very important organization in our community that promotes civil rights and justice in our society, not only for people of color, but for many people who are marginalized for their ethnicity, religion, culture, age, sexual orientation, and so forth. The NAACP primarily works through education and advocacy and is an all-volunteer organization. I just don't need to say anything more about this, I know, because this is an organization that we have supported and continue to support as a church community. So all I can do is thank you so much for your generosity and commitment to supporting organizations like this in Spokane, which is very important to the health of our community. So thank you. You can contribute, as always, by sending a check, just notifying us what it is for in the memo line, or by going online to our donations tab and finding the special collections and doing so there. So again, thank you so much for your kindness and compassion. And now it is time for our story for all ages. And today, given the theme of the overall service around Star Trek, I'm going to, I want to talk to you a little bit about conscience. I call this a Star Trek conscience. So our conscience is what allows us to do the right thing even when nobody else is watching. Okay, so when we're young, we rely on adults like our parents or our teachers to help us understand how we should behave. But as we grow up, we develop a conscience of our own. But sometimes knowing what we should and shouldn't do still isn't easy. And that's when our conscience starts arguing with us. That's right. Sometimes having a conscience means we have to argue with ourselves by questioning our own ideas about what's right and what's wrong. So, have you ever seen one of those cartoons where somebody's struggling over an issue and a devil pops up over one shoulder and an angel pops up over the other? And they start arguing about what the best thing to do is. Have a slice of devil foods cake. It'll give you sweet dreams. Chocolate will keep you up at night. Have angel foods cake. So sometimes when I argue with myself about the right thing to do, I try to think about what some people I admire might do. What would Socrates do? You mean Socrates. What would Doug's Dunny do? Okay, well, they could be real or they could be fictional characters that you admire, like Barack Obama, who was a real president, or a pretend person like Princess Leia from Star Wars. There you go, Sonny. I prefer Han Solo. To Yoda you should listen. Okay. Of course, I prefer Star Trek to Star Wars. So my role models are going to be characters like Captain Kirk. Although the two characters that most often argued about the right thing to do were Mr. Spock. You should always think logically. Okay. And Dr. McCoy. Use your feelings, man. You're half human. Well, Doctor, you're thinking scientifically. You're not thinking scientifically, you're thinking emotionally. I'm a doctor, not a computer. Well, like the time that Captain Kirk was turned into two people in a transporter accident, one was very angry and the other was very timid. They were going to have to try something dangerous to put the two halves back together. And Dr. McCoy argued, Jim, you can't risk your life on a theory. And Spock said, being split in half is no theory for me, Doctor. I have a human half and an alien half, constantly at war with each other. I survive because my intelligence wins over both, makes them live together. Then there was the time when they were trying to escape an alien planet but had to run back to save Spock, even though they didn't have time, putting the rest of the crew in danger. I told you to lift off. Don't be a fool, Spock. We cannot just leave you out there. The logical thing for you would be leave me behind. Spock, remind me to tell you that I'm sick and tired of your logic. That is a most illogical attitude. So, think about the people that you admire, and when you're wondering what the best thing to do is, ask yourself what they would do. Mr. Spock is the most cold-blooded man I've ever known. Why, thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
This is the time in our service when we pause and reflect in meditation. Please find a comfortable, receptive posture. Take some deep breaths. Close your eyes if you wish. Silence will follow these words by Sadi. The world is not a courtroom. There is no judge, no jury, no plaintiff. This is a caravan filled with eccentric beings telling wondrous stories about God.
My reading today is from Heraclitus. Whosoever wishes to know about the world must learn about it in its particular details. Knowledge is not intelligence. In searching for the truth, be ready for the unexpected. Change alone is unchanging. The same road goes both up and down. The beginning of a circle is also its end. Not I, but the world says it. All is one. And yet, everything comes in season.
If we had our TV screen today, I wouldn't be saying one word. You would be a little more surprised, but I'm going to give you a little heads up. I'm going to be singing the Star Trek theme, and all of you, I'm sure many of you at least, know that theme. What you may not know is that Gene Roddenberry, the series creator, did write words to that Star Trek theme. And I will be singing those as well as the usual today. in star flight. I know he'll find in star-clustered regions love, strange love, a star woman teaches. I know his journey ends never. His Star Trek will go on forever. But tell him while he wanders his story sees, remember, remember me.
Wow, thank you both so much for that. I had no clue that there were lyrics to that theme song. You didn't either. You just made them up? No. You did some research and you found it.
Yes, and actually, the very first original, they changed both music a little bit and some of the lyrics. These were the lyrics that he wrote.
So they're in the very first music they had actually changed the first words that he. So this was the original song.
They changed the melody.
They changed the melody. This was.
They just tweaked it a little bit to get it to do better.
They tweaked it better for the series, but this was the original theme song written by Gene Roddenberry. Wow. See, a Star Trek fact I did not know. Thank you so much for both educating and entertaining me. And I'm not sure why the TV isn't working when we are talking about a TV show. Ironic, right? But I'm sure it has something to do with some plot by either the Klingons or the Romulans. For sure. But just in case you don't know, since it's not on the screen, the title of the sermon is Trekkie Todd, Indulging My Star Trek Obsession. Although most people call us Trekkies, but we're really Trekkers. So, but that's okay. I don't mind either. So, 8 years ago, believe it or not, at the start of 2013, I gave a sermon entitled, My First and Only Star Trek Geek Sermon, asking those who heard it to indulge my obsession just this once. As I explained then, as much as I love the iconic television series and the cultural phenomenon that is still growing in its wake, and even though it addresses many social issues that are perfect for a Sunday message in a Unitarian church, I have long restrained from alluding to Star Trek in my sermons. Even though it is essentially a series of morality plays that boldly explored some of the most challenging issues of its own day in the late 1960s, issues like racism and war and nuclear annihilation, sexism and freedom from religious tyranny and superstition, I intentionally don't make a lot of references to it in my sermons. This is so even though I love Star Trek, and I mean that in the truest sense of the word. I have deep affections in the sense of nostalgia for its characters and its stories. The ringtone on my cell phone is the voice of Lieutenant Uhura saying, "Enterprise to Captain Kirk, come in, Captain." And I still watch reruns of the show, even though I know each episode by heart, own all the original Star Trek films, am addicted to its many television spin-offs, and read lots of Star Trek novels while drinking from a Star Trek coffee mug, one of the Star Trek coffee mugs my kids have given me on various Christmases. So my reluctance to draw upon Star Trek on Sunday mornings isn't because I don't view it as a legitimate source of inspiration and reflection. In truth, I consider Star Trek a major source of inspiration and instruction in my own journey. As a child, my after-school babysitter, a 19-inch black and white television with a pair of rabbit ears and a rotary dial for switching between about half a dozen stations, was my small window into the world beyond the tiny box I lived in with my dysfunctional family. And Star Trek was my escape into a larger universe with a much better future. Television can be rightly criticized as a massive time suck. In his book on mind-altering substances, Food of the Gods, the late Terence McKenna says, the nearest analogy to the addictive power of television and the transformation of values that is wrought in the life of the heavy user is probably heroin. Television, while chemically non-invasive, nevertheless is every bit as addicting and physiologically damaging as any other drug. In the United States, there are many more televisions than households. The average television set is on 6 hours a day, and the average person watches more than 5 hours a day, nearly 1/3 of their waking time. As a child, I spent hours before my electronic crutch. My gaze transfixed my face without expression and let it emancipate me from the troubled reality I called home, and from all the hate and anger and fear and violence and prejudice I experienced living within the tumult of America's first integrated neighborhoods and schools. By the time I was only 5 years old, my innocence had been lost, and I knew that the real world was a frightening and a dangerous and an unfair place. So television became my refuge, providing me with better visions of the strange new world that I was born into. Perhaps it did numb me to the difficulties of my own reality, imposed negative cultural values on me, and made me a more compliant citizen and willing consumer. But it also exposed me to values and visions for the world that I still maintain and cherish. To this day, I attribute my otherwise inexplicable early childhood wish to become a minister to a character I saw on the 1967 sitcom The Flying Nun, starring Sally Field, a lightweight Sister Bertrille in the convent San Tanco, who would take flight every time a slight gust of wind caught her winged headpiece of her habit. Carlos Ramirez was a character who must have donned a priest collar in an episode or two to help get the flying nun out of a fix, because I always thought he was a priest. As a preschooler, I admired how kind and compassionate he was compared to my own father. Ramirez, played by Argentine actor Alejandro Rey, gave me an alternative image of manhood and the kind of man that I wanted to grow up to be like. And as it turns out, Ramirez was actually a playboy and a casino owner in the show, who only wore the collar again to help the flying nun out of a jam on occasion. Had I understood this at 4 years old, I might have grown up to be behind a bar instead, or maybe worse, maybe behind bars. I also liked watching The Courtship of Eddie's Father, a 1969 show starring Bill Bixby as a widowed father whose love for his young son led him to abandon male stereotypes to help fill his deceased wife's shoes by learning not only to be a good father, but also a tender mother to his little boy. Bixby showed me what a kind father looks like and the kind of father that I wanted to become. Bonanza, the late 1950s show starring Lauren Green as a widowed rancher, also countered the cowboy stereotype by portraying a wise, caring, and involved father to his 3 motherless boys. Another 1960s Western, The Big Valley, starring the powerful Barbara Stanwyck as a widowed rancher, proved that a woman could also debunk the cultural stereotypes of the day by being a great mother, a graceful lady, and as strong and capable as any man when it came to running both a household and a business. Her character, Victoria Barclay, was the original woman's liber, and she showed me early on that women are equal to men. If art mimics life, Stanwyck, an orphan raised in foster homes, had become the highest paid woman in America in 1944, while still only in her 30s. The Brady Bunch is often lampooned as the impossibly perfect family in which the children always get along with each other and dutifully listen to the instructions and advice of their wise and doting parents. But the story really is about two broken and grieving families who manage to come together and through love and respect form a perfect family that can get along. This may have been particularly appreciated in the culture with the rising divorce rate at the time, but also because it originally aired between 1969 and 1974, when America itself was torn apart by racism and the Vietnam War. In the Brady Bunch, Carolyn and Mike are equal partners, and their 3 daughters are equal to their 3 sons. This was a show showing us all what we can accomplish when we set aside our differences, come together, and treat one another as equals, and treat one another as part of one family. But if this idyllic family was still too syrupy for your taste, you could always turn to the Partridge Family, about a single, widowed mother with 5 kids that never got along. The 1970 show, also with a strong female lead, showed me that it is possible for real families with real problems to care for each other, even if they aren't perfect. It showed us that we don't have to be perfect so long as we can love one another. So even though I agree with Terence McKenna that television is often a manufactured data stream that can be sanitized to protect or impose cultural values, it has also proven to sometimes be an expression of the counterculture by offering us examples of characters who defy our cultural stereotypes. And for me, this was most true of the original Star Trek series that ran for only 3 seasons, between 1966 and 1969. NBC actually canceled the show after its 2nd season, but had little choice but to renew it after receiving over 1 million fan letters begging them to do so. So instead of cancellation, still not realizing the gold mine they had, they moved it to 10 p.m. on Friday nights, which was their way of effectively killing it. But just a year later, in 1970, when local stations began syndicating it during after-school hours, kids like me tuned in and helped turn it into an entertainment phenomenon that now includes 9 series, with more on their way, 13 feature films, countless novels and fan conventions, and is still expanding over more than 50 years. Even the first NASA space shuttle was given the name of Star Trek's fictional, iconic spaceship, Enterprise. Even so, and as huge a fan as I am, this is only the 2nd time I've chosen to focus on Star Trek in a sermon during the past 20, God, how long has it been? 23 years, I think. And it is largely a repetition of what I said the first time. So I hope I'm not boring you. This is mostly because a Star Trek sermon seems to me almost like a Unitarian Universalist cliche. A lot of you ministers struggle to find depth in their sermons and tend to use superficial metaphors. But ours is an old religion with lots of philosophical and theological depth that should be delved into on Sunday mornings. So I don't like cheapening it with cliches or superficial metaphors. Just Google Star Trek and Unitarian sometime and see for yourself how many Unitarian Universalist sermons, articles, and clubs are out there. As anyone who has listened to me often enough will know, my sermons are hardly cliche or superficial. At heart, I'm still a rebellious teenager and don't like saying what is expected of me any more than I like doing what is expected of me. I also like to think deeply about things, given my background in philosophy and psychology, and I have better material to draw upon than the rather simplistic morality plays of Star Trek that you can easily understand by watching the show for yourself, Sonny. Okay? Finally, basing sermons on Star Trek rather than the depth of our own liberal religious tradition is precisely what critics of our faith often ridicule UU ministers for. So even though I love the show and I find it to be a great source of personal inspiration and entertainment, I seldom reference it to make a point. But in fairness, Star Trek is such a tremendous part of American culture and increasingly of our global culture, it deserves some in-depth discussion in our Unitarian pulpits now and again. Just in case there's a small chance that you know little about Star Trek, Sonny, it's a show about the 23rd century Starship Enterprise and her crew trekking through the universe in order to reach out and explore strange new worlds. Its main characters are the cowboy-esque Captain Kirk, his science officer, Mr. Spock, who you met a while ago, an alien with pointed ears, raised eyebrows, and no emotions, and Dr. McCoy, a futuristic version of a plain-spoken country doctor with a terrible bedside manner. But in 1966, when it first aired, during the Vietnam era, the Cold War, and the Civil Rights struggle, it also included a prominent Asian, a Russian, and a black cast member, Mr. Sulu, Mr. Chekhov, and Lieutenant Uhura, among other regulars on the show. In the documentary Trek Nation about the show's creator, Gene Roddenberry, for example, the black cast member, again, actress Nichelle Nichols, who played Lieutenant Uhura, tells us the following story. I told Gene after the first season that I would not be returning to the show, that I wanted to return to my first love, which is musical theater. But I didn't know that meeting a Star Trek fan would change my life. I was told that a fan wanted to meet me, and when I turned around and looked into the face of Dr. Martin Luther King, I was breathless. And he said, yes, I'm a Trekker. I'm a Star Trek fan. And he told me that Star Trek was one of the only shows that his wife, Coretta, and he would allow their little children to stay up and watch. And I thanked him, and I told him that I was leaving the show. All the smile came off his face, and he said, you can't do that. He said, don't you understand that for the first time we're seen as we should be seen? You don't have a black role, you have an equal role. And when I went back to work Monday morning, I went to Gene's office and I told him what had happened over the weekend, and he said, welcome home. Hearing that was really the birth of this sermon. Naturally, I was incredibly moved upon hearing this story, this history, and realized how bold Star Trek really was in confronting the prejudices of its day. As Gene Roddenberry himself said, I was pleased in those days when you couldn't even get blacks on television that I not only had a black, but a black woman and a black officer, and I thought, that'll show them. As you can imagine, not everyone was happy about it back then. The person responsible for dealing with all the fan mail they got recounts, "We got one marvelous letter from a woman who pointed out that she was not at all prejudiced, and she really believed in equality and all of this. And since we had a Russian, which she sort of agreed with, and a Scotsman and an Oriental, there really was no need to have Nichelle Nichols. And we sent her an autographed picture of Nichelle and our thanks." Additionally, some TV stations in the South refused to air Star Trek even when it was still on network television because of its racially mixed cast. But Roddenberry didn't care one iota. He truly did take television where no one had gone before and regularly took on the subject of racism and prejudice. In one episode, a kiss between Lieutenant Uhura and Captain Kirk made history as the first interracial kiss ever on television. In another episode, two alien men, completely black on one half of their bodies and completely white on the other, are the last two members of their species. They're at war with each other, and the rest have already killed each other off due to extreme prejudice. When Captain Kirk can't understand why they hate each other and what the difference is that they see in each other, they explain how obvious it should be. Their black and white halves are on opposite sides. In yet another episode, when it is revealed that Mr. Spock is a Vulcan, as a Vulcan, looks a lot like a Romulan, one of Starfleet's most dreaded enemies, a crewman makes an offhanded remark suggesting Spock might be a spy. "I didn't quite get that, Mr. Stiles," Captain Kirk says. "Nothing," the crewman responds. "Repeat it," Kirk commands. "I was suggesting that Mr. Spock could probably translate the Romulan message for you, sir." "I'm assuming you're complimenting Mr. Spock on his ability to decode," Kirk asked. "I'm not sure," crewman says. Kirk then gets in his face. "Well, here's one thing you can be sure of, mister. Leave any bigotry in your quarters. There's no room for it on our bridge. Do I make myself clear?" And all of us kids watching and wanting to be just like Captain Kirk were clear too. All of us kids in the late 1960s and early 1970s were clear too. There was no room in the universe for bigotry. Spock, by the way, was intentionally made to look like a devil and was originally even conceived of with red skin. It didn't happen because of makeup issues. One of the other frequent moral dilemmas on Star Trek regards the use of violence and war to resolve conflict. In an episode involving the dreaded Klingon Empire, a warlike race that was no doubt a caricature of our idea of the Russians, the American idea of the Russians, complete with bushy eyebrows and a sash around their uniforms and flared pants, a superior race of pacifists prevents them from fighting. Otherwise, both sides would have completely annihilated each other, touching upon the very real threat of nuclear holocaust. Afterward, all of the Klingon episodes, according to scriptwriter David Gerrold, were in one way or another restatements of the original. Klingons and Earthmen must not fight, a.k.a. Russians and Americans must not fight either. Imagine seeing this amidst the Cold War, when children had to have drills in school where they ducked under their desk in case of a nuclear explosion. Star Trek is certainly known for all of its alien women dressed up in scant outfits, as well as for Captain Kirk's many romantic escapades, and can be fairly criticized for being somewhat sexist, especially by today's standards. But it is also fair to acknowledge the show for helping us to achieve today's standards, at least at times by portraying women as equals. One episode begins, for example, with an attractive female crew member rubbing Kirk's back while he's in his captain's chair. He mistook her for Spock and was completely embarrassed by the encounter. Later in the same episode, they're on a planet that makes whatever they're thinking about come true. She thinks of a princess costume and is soon dressed up like a princess. But a few minutes later, when a black knight she conjures up unintentionally kills Dr. McCoy with a lance, she begins screaming and crying uncontrollably, just as TV and film often stereotyped women in those days. Captain Kirk takes her by the shoulders and sternly says, "We're in trouble. I need every crewman alert and thinking." She instantly stops, regains her composure, and says, "Aye, aye, sir." Keep in mind, on Star Trek, everyone is called Mr., even females. In the final episode of the original series, Captain Kirk's body is actually inhabited and taken over by a woman who has been overlooked for promotion to the captain's seat simply because of her gender. And William Shatner does an outstanding job of actually playing a female character. The final value that I gained from watching Star Trek that I'll mention here regards our need as human beings to abandon superstitious and primitive beliefs if we're ever going to evolve. This was a common theme, but the one episode I'll mention was about the Greek god Adonis, who captures the Enterprise and its crew, demanding that they worship him. It turns out, in this episode, the Greek gods were an alien race with almost omnipotent powers. They left Earth when humans stopped revering them, but Adonis wants to return to the glory days. After Kirk and his crew manage to destroy the god's power source, Adonis weeps. "I would have cherished you, cared for you. I would have loved you as a father loves his children. Did I ask so much?" To which Kirk replies, "We've outgrown you. You've asked for something we can no longer give." That's what makes Star Trek so unique. It doesn't fall into pointless debates over the question of God's existence. It simply says it doesn't matter. God or no God, humans need to take responsibility for ourselves and for improving the world and for creating a better future. So these are the values that I learned from Star Trek so long ago in my life and that have stayed with me and helped shape me ever since. There's no room for bigotry. We must not fight or make war. Men and women are equals. And humans don't need God to be good or to improve their lives. We must take responsibility for ourselves. And though I may seldom, if ever, mention this iconic show by name, these are the themes of my own continuing mission and that are present with me every Sunday in every sermon and in every day of my life. So as cliche as it may sound, let me conclude by saying, live long and prosper. Beam me up, Scotty. Thank you.
We're going to cut our closing hymn a little short today since we have no screen with lyrics. So I will just sing the first verse, and hopefully you can do that with me to the best of your ability. I'd like to remind you, however, that every sun that comes in our emailed sun includes lyrics to the hymn. I think it's under the sermon. if I remember Michelle telling me right, so that you can always print those out ahead of time if you'd like to do that. And given the fact that we have gremlins in our midst, perhaps that'd be a good thing to do. Okay, sing out praises for the journey. Sing out praises for the journey, pilgrims we who carry on, searchers in the soul's deep yearnings, like our forebears in their time. We seek out the Spirit's wholeness in the endless human quest.
Our benediction today is from John Muir. How hard to realize that every camp of men or beast has this glorious starry firmament for a roof. In such places, standing alone on the mountaintop, it is easy to realize that whatever special nests we make, leaves and moss like the marmots and birds, or tents or piled stone, we all dwell in the house of one room, the world with a firmament for its roof, and we are sailing the celestial spaces without leaving any track. Live long and prosper. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum and shalom.
Shalom.